The worst answer I've ever heard to this question was from a candidate who actually refused to spill the beans over whatever he was working on during that job interview. And he actually told the interviewer, hey, I cannot tell you what I'm currently working on because I don't feel comfortable about this. Now, after talking to them for a while, I realized that the actual problem was what I was suspecting. He was not able to pick the right words to communicate the idea that he must have transmitted, because after all, in a job interview, you must impress your employer in one way or another. So I'm not telling you here to spill the beans on whatever confidential details of the project that you're working on, but still you can find the words to characterize that project and have a very constructive conversation. Now, it only happened once, so I wouldn't say it's all that common. The second mistake I wanted to touch upon here is when you talk about an invention that's completely off topic with regards to the role that you're applying for. So for example, if you're applying for a sales role, it makes no sense to talk about how your most recent invention is to make an HTML page of something. Of course, unless that sales role implies, working with data and working with digital information, and there's a specific niche for you that you want to address with that invention. But you must find some invention that it's from your area, from the job description that you're applying for, and it must make sense in your pitch, right? After all, you're pitching for a sales job, not for a developer role here. So try to make the invention to be from your area of activity. Now, the third mistake I wanted to quickly touch upon here is when you talk about a rather incremental change that you did that does not really qualify as an invention. So this often happens for rather junior roles. For example, for an SD, for a junior SD, when you added the new feature that your professors requested you to add to a project, right? So of course, unless that feature was you did something innovative in that feature itself, but then you should pitch it in another way. But you should stay away. You should try to make a difference between an incremental change and something innovative. So it's very much in the language, what type of language you use to sell yourself on. But the idea is that you should be aware that many people go to confuse and lower too much the quality of their answer because it's a rather incremental thing that they're talking about. And probably, the biggest mistake with this question, which is, to be honest with you, is not that complex of a question, is that people omit to prepare of it because they underestimate how often it's actually asked in job interviews. For more technical roles, it's actually one of those questions right there with a failure, or with even the more general ones with tell me about yourself. So it's that common that they ask you about something interesting that you've done, or another variation of this would be a time when you came up with a simple solution to a complex problem. So that's also a time when you had to be inventive to find something that makes sense. Now, let me close this by giving you a couple of examples of what other people said of inventive, of innovations that they did. So for example, for an HR business partner, they were just getting started with a new aviation customer, and the problem with that customer was that their workers were attracted by one of their competitors who were offering higher hourly wages, because at that time of the year they had a lot of work to do, and it was a seasonal thing. And for that she invented, long story short, she invented a bonus system for temporary workers to incentivize them to stay with that aviation company, and for them to no longer feel attracted about the higher wages at the company because of the temporary shift also in their bonus system. So that's how she solved the problem of workers not staying for that company. Actually, they did stay in the end. Or another example would be when, for example, a software architect who had a solution that allowed their customers to measure the performance of their pages. And actually, the solution that was already in the software was not really working well. And for this, he implemented a script injection mechanism, which is patent pending, that can be injected into any web page, and that will, regardless of its structure, and that will automatically measure the performance of, give some interesting metrics of that page. So it's an innovation in the sense that it works with any page. So the algorithm is so good that it knows exactly where to insert, to inject that script to be able to measure that performance. Or the third example here would be for a sales guy to be requested an extra stock of inventory from one of the major customers. And because they didn't have that stock, they actually found a rather innovative solution to partner up with one of their competitors for a slightly higher price, but still to be able to deliver the inventory requested by their customers and eventually have a successful long-term business with them. So the innovation here was, that they couldn't have scaled up, they couldn't have, he couldn't have found more suppliers in his own network. So rather than, telling his customer that, hey, I cannot help you with this, he actually partnered with a competitor and found, a middle ground to maybe, not have a profit on the short term, but actually think long term for that solution. And of course, it was innovative because it's not straightforward to do this, if you think about it. So this would be, some of the examples of coming up with innovation, and also be prepared here for follow-up questions. Like, it's very common for the interviewer to become really interested in whatever you're talking about, especially, if you're applying for a technical role or you're applying for a role that your interviewer is very familiar with, that it's very common for them to ask you for metrics, for measurable information. And it's also very common for them to challenge you with, okay, but why was this important? Right? So it's also in the follow-up. So you should think about this innovation, about this invention as a starting point for a broader conversation. And of course, it pays off that if you prepare in advance what you're going to talk about, you actually maximize your chances to talk about the most interesting possible topic within this context. So hopefully you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.